SpaceX has been doing a lot recently, and now they want to outpace themselves. In a recent FAA filing, SpaceX has revealed the exact flight profile and the timeline for Starship's maiden orbital flight test, which by the way can take place as early as June 20th. And quite surprisingly, both Starship SN20 and Super Heavy BN3 won't be recovered and would rather try to soft land on the ocean. So in this video, we'll dive inside Starship's first orbital flight test and look at the flight profile and the timeline, and finally try to understand why SpaceX won't recover the first orbital class Starship. In March, a report by NASA Spaceflight revealed that SpaceX has set an ambitious goal of launching Starship to orbit as early as July this year. The plan is to use Starship SN20 and Super Heavy BN3 for the first orbital flight. And now after Starship SN15's success, Elon Musk and his team are pushing hard to meet that ambitious goal. So rather than wasting time, let's take a look at the flight profile for the orbital flight test. As stated in the filing, Starship will launch from Starbase. For those who don't know yet, this is what SpaceX like to call their launch and manufacturing facility in Boca Chica. About 3 minutes after liftoff, the launch vehicle will undergo stage separation. After the stage separation, the flight profile of the Super Heavy booster will look a lot similar to the Falcon 9 first stage. Super Heavy will perform a boost back burn followed by an entry burn, and finally try to soft land in the Gulf of Mexico. In the meantime, Starship SN20 will continue on its way towards the targeted orbit using its 3 vacuum-optimized Raptor engines. Shortly after orbital insertion, Starship will get ready for the re-entry. SN20 will perform a controlled descent and will finally attempt a targeted powered landing in the ocean. The entire orbital flight test is expected to last a total of 90 minutes and 20 seconds. Before we discuss about the ocean landing, let's first take a look at the events that would occur during the flight. After lifting off, the Super Heavy booster's Raptor engine would shut down at T plus 169 seconds, just 2 seconds before the stage separation. The booster is expected to touch down in the ocean at about T plus 5 minutes and 9 seconds. During all this time, Starship's Raptor engine would have already ignited at about T plus 176 seconds. If everything goes well, Starship will reach orbit at about T plus 8 minutes and 41 seconds. Finally, after completing 3/4 of orbit around the Earth, Starship will re-enter the atmosphere for a propulsive landing on the ocean. If Starship survives the re-entry, which is quite difficult, it is expected to soft land at about T plus 90 minutes, 20 seconds. Now the big question, why the ocean landing? Well, the answer is quite straightforward. The likelihood of any of the events occurring successfully is quite low. At almost every point in flight, there is a good chance of failure, and this has been stated in the FAA filings as well. The objective of the flight test is to gather as much data as possible to quantify the re-entry dynamics and better understand what Starship experiences during the orbital flight regime, which in fact is very difficult to predict using computer simulations. The data that SpaceX would gather will help them to make important design changes and would likely increase the probability of success in future. Also, it is important to note that during the early phase, the Falcon 9 boosters also performed the ocean landings, and SpaceX started to move towards the drone ship and landing pads only after they had gathered enough data through soft ocean landings. So for the first few orbital flight tests, we would likely see SpaceX trying to land Starship and Super Heavy on the ocean. Even after reaching orbit for the first time, SpaceX's Starship development would largely continue unchanged, treating the orbital regime just another sandbox to test and refine the Starship prototypes. Given all the extraordinary problems that SpaceX would need to solve in order to reach orbit, there is a good chance that the first orbital flight attempt might fail. If the launch is initially successful, it is just as likely that Super Heavy will fail its first hypersonic launch and landing attempt. If Starship itself reaches orbit in a single piece, any number of issues can kill the vehicle in space. If it survives long enough to line up for re-entry, Starship's first orbital velocity re-entry, one of the biggest challenges in aerospace industry, could easily destroy the spacecraft. And even if Starship somehow makes it through the re-entry, the stresses of the orbital spaceflight and re-entry could easily prevent Raptor engines from performing nominally and can result in a rapid unscheduled disassembly. This is all just to say that as SpaceX set their sight on the orbital flight, the trajectory is still a continuation of the ongoing test campaign and the rapid iterative development process. While orbit-capable starships will likely be more expensive than their suborbital counterparts The differences are small enough that SpaceX will continue to push the envelope and risk losing some prototypes to uncover and fix some design and technical flaws as early as possible. Even though the launch can happen as early as June 20th, there is a good chance that it will get pushed ahead into July, August, or even September. But if SpaceX successfully reaches orbit before the end of this year, it will be a huge success for the entire Starship program. What do you think? What is the probability of success for the first orbital test? Let me know in the comment section. If you're new here and like the content, do consider subscribing the channel. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.